The night was dark and stormy, the kind that made the old castle walls groan. Inside the grand hall of the Château de Blois, the air was thick with tension. King Francis I, the powerful ruler of France, sat on his throne, his face a mask of stern resolve. Around him, the nobles of the realm whispered and shuffled, their eyes darting nervously. Outside, the winds howled like the cries of the damned, and the rain lashed against the windows as if trying to break through the stone walls. In the midst of this chaos, a young man named Jean Calvin stood, his voice steady despite the storm. He was a scholar, a man of the cloth. But tonight he was a revolutionary. Calvin's words cut through the noise, demanding change, calling for a new way of thinking and living. He spoke of a God who was just and merciful, a God who did not need the elaborate rituals and corrupt practices of the Catholic Church. He spoke of a faith that was personal, a faith that could be lived in the heart of every believer. The nobles listened, some with curiosity, others with fear. The Catholic Church had ruled France for centuries, and its power was absolute. But Calvin's ideas were spreading like wildfire, and the old order was beginning to crack. The king, though skeptical, could not ignore the growing unrest. He knew that if he did not address the demands of the reformers, the storm outside might soon become a storm within. Calvin's message was clear. The people of France were hungry for a new kind of church, a church that was pure and true to the teachings of the Bible. He called for the training of new pastors, for the establishment of new churches, and for the rejection of the old corrupt ways. His words were not just a call to religious reform, they were a call to revolution. As the night wore on, the king's advisors whispered among themselves. Some argued that Calvin should be silenced, that his ideas were dangerous and heretical. Others, however, saw the potential in his words. They knew that the people were restless, and that a new movement was taking shape. The king, torn between his loyalty to the church and his duty to his people, was forced to make a difficult decision. The storm outside finally began to subside, but the storm within the castle walls was just beginning. The next morning, the king issued a decree. A council would be formed to discuss the demands of the reformers. It was a small step, but it was a step that would change the course of French history. In the weeks and months that followed, the reformers' movement gained momentum. New pastors were trained, and new churches were established. The people of France, tired of the corruption and hypocrisy of the old church, flocked to these new places of worship. The Catholic Church, sensing the threat, began to crack down on the reformers, but it was too late. The seeds of change had been planted, and they were growing fast. The storm that had raged that night at the Château de Blois was just the beginning. It was the first sign of a revolution that would sweep through France, changing the lives of millions and reshaping the very fabric of society. The world was about to change, and there was no going back. As the movement grew, so did the challenges. The Catholic Church, with its vast resources and influence, did not take the threat lightly. They labeled the reformers as heretics and sought to silence them by any means necessary. But the reformers were determined. They wrote books, published pamphlets, and preached in secret, spreading their message far and wide. One of the key figures in this movement was a man named William Farel. Farel, a fiery preacher, traveled throughout France, Switzerland, and Germany, spreading the message of the Reformation. He was known for his passionate sermons and his unwavering commitment to the cause. Farel's efforts were not in vain. He helped establish new churches and trained new pastors. ensuring that the movement would continue to grow. Another important figure was Theodore Beza, a close friend and colleague of Calvin. Beza was a brilliant scholar and a skilled diplomat. He worked tirelessly to spread the ideas of the Reformation, not just in France, but across Europe. His correspondence with other reformers and his writings on the subject helped to solidify the movement's principles and goals. The movement was not just about religious change, it was about social and political change as well. The reformers believed that the church should be free from the control of the state and that the people should have a say in how their communities were run. This idea of a church governed by the people, known as the Presbyterian system, was a radical departure from the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church. As the movement grew, it also faced increasing opposition. The Catholic Church, with the support of the French monarchy, began to crack down on the reformers. This led to a series of conflicts known as the Wars of Religion. The Huguenots, as the French Protestants were called, faced persecution, violence, and even death. Despite this, they continued to fight for their beliefs. One of the most significant events of this period was the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572. On this day, thousands of Huguenots were massacred in Paris and other parts of France. The event was a turning point in the Wars of Religion, and it deepened the divide between the Catholics and the Huguenots. The Reformation in France had a profound impact on the country. It changed the way people thought about religion, politics, and society. The Huguenots, despite facing immense challenges, managed to establish a strong presence in France. They built their own churches, created their own schools, and developed their own communities. Their influence extended beyond the religious sphere, shaping the political and cultural landscape of France. The Reformation also had a significant impact on other parts of Europe. The ideas of Calvin and other reformers spread to countries like Scotland, where they played a crucial role in the Scottish Reformation. In Scotland, the reformers, led by John Knox, sought to create a church that was free from the influence of the state and governed by the people. This movement, known as the Kirk, would go on to shape the religious and political landscape of Scotland for centuries. The storm that had raged in France was not isolated. Across the North Sea, in Scotland, a similar movement was taking shape. John Knox, a fiery preacher and reformer, was at the forefront of this movement. Knox, like Calvin, believed that the church should be pure and true to the teachings of the Bible. He called for the end of the corrupt practices of the Catholic Church and the establishment of a new Reformed church. Knox's message resonated with the people of Scotland, who were tired of the corruption and hypocrisy of the old church. The Scottish Reformation, like the French Reformation, was not just about religious change. It was about social and political change as well. The reformers believed that the church should be free from the control of the state and that the people should have a say in how their communities were run. The Scottish Reformation was marked by intense debates and conflicts. The reformers faced opposition from the Catholic Church and the Scottish monarchy, but they were determined to see their vision through. Knox and his followers worked tirelessly to spread their message, and they eventually succeeded in establishing a new church, the Kirk, which would become a central part of Scottish life. The Reformation was not just a national movement, it was a local movement as well. In cities and towns across France and Scotland, the reformers worked to spread their message and establish new churches. In Rouen, for example, the reformers faced significant challenges, but they managed to establish a strong presence. They built their own churches, created their own schools, and developed their own communities. The reformers in Rouen were not just fighting for religious change. they were fighting for social and political change as well. In Scotland, the Reformers faced similar challenges. In cities like Edinburgh and Aberdeen, the Reformers worked to spread their message and establish new churches. They faced opposition from the Catholic Church and the Scottish monarchy, but they were determined to see their vision through. The Reformers in these cities were not just fighting for religious change, they were fighting for a new way of life. The Reformation was not just a movement of the elite, it was a movement of the people. The Reformers believed that the people should have a say in how their communities were run, and they worked to ensure that the people had a voice. The Reformers in France and Scotland were not just fighting for religious change. They were fighting for a new kind of society, a society where the people had a say in the decisions that affected their lives. The Reformation changed the way people thought about religion, politics, and society. It challenged the old order and created a new one. The storm that had raged in the Château de Blois that night was just the beginning. The world was about to change, and there was no going back. The Netherlands in the 16th century was a place of great change and conflict. The Reformation, a movement that sought to reform the Catholic Church, had a profound impact on the region. This chapter explores how the Reformation unfolded in the Netherlands, focusing on the key events, people, and ideas that shaped this revolutionary period. In the early 16th century, the Netherlands was part of the Holy Roman Empire, ruled by Emperor Charles V. Many people in the Netherlands were dissatisfied with the Catholic Church, which they saw as corrupt and out of touch with their needs. This dissatisfaction laid the groundwork for the Reformation. One of the early figures who influenced the Reformation in the Netherlands was Martin Luther, a German monk whose ideas spread quickly through the region. However, it was the teachings of John Calvin that had the most lasting impact. Calvin's ideas emphasized the importance of individual faith and the idea that salvation was predestined by God. These ideas resonated with many people in the Netherlands, leading to the formation of secret Calvinist churches. These churches, known as churches under the cross, operated in secret because the Catholic authorities were harshly persecuting anyone who opposed the church. In 1566, tensions reached a boiling point. A group of nobles, known as the Gueux or beggars, presented a petition to the regent, Margaret of Parma, demanding religious tolerance. When their demands were ignored, the Gueux took matters into their own hands. They organized a series of protests and demonstrations which eventually led to the outbreak of iconoclasm, or the destruction of religious images. This event, known as the Beeldenstorm, saw mobs of Protestants smashing statues and other religious symbols in churches across the Netherlands. The iconoclasm was a turning point. The Catholic authorities, led by the Duke of Alva, responded with brutal force. Alva established the Council of Troubles, which was responsible for the arrest, trial, and execution of thousands of Protestants. This period of repression, known as the Spanish Fury, only intensified the resolve of the Protestants. Despite the repression, the Reformation continued to spread. In 1571, a group of Calvinist leaders met in the city of Emden, in Germany, to organize the Reformed Church. This meeting, known as the Synod of Emden, was a significant step in the development of the Dutch Reformed Church. The Synod established a set of church ordinances and regulations that helped to standardize the practices of the Reformed churches. The Reformation also had a significant impact on the political landscape of the Netherlands. The Dutch provinces, particularly in the north, began to resist Spanish rule. In 1579, the northern provinces formed the Union of Utrecht, a political alliance that laid the foundation for the Dutch Republic. The Union of Utrecht was a declaration of independence from Spain and a commitment to religious freedom. The Reformed Church played a crucial role in the Dutch Republic. It became the state church, and its influence extended into many aspects of society. The Church was responsible for education, social welfare, and moral discipline. The Reformed Church also played a key role in the development of Dutch culture, promoting the values of hard work, thrift, and piety. However, the relationship between the Church and the state was not always smooth. There were frequent debates and conflicts over the extent of the Church's authority. Some people, known as libertines, argued for a more tolerant and less rigid approach to religion. These debates reflected the broader tensions in Dutch society between tradition and innovation, authority and freedom. The Reformation in the Netherlands was not just a religious movement. It was also a political and social revolution. It transformed the way people thought about religion, government, and society. The Dutch Reformed Church became a symbol of Dutch identity and a source of pride for the people of the Netherlands. The legacy of the Reformation continues to shape Dutch culture and society to this day. The Reformation in the Netherlands was a complex and multifaceted process. It involved the spread of new religious ideas, the formation of secret churches, the outbreak of iconoclasm, and the establishment of the Dutch Reformed Church. It also involved political resistance, the formation of the Dutch Republic, and ongoing debates about the role of the Church in society. The Reformation in the Netherlands was a true revolution, one that changed the course of history. The Reformation in the northern Netherlands was a time of great change and conflict. It wasn't just about religious beliefs. It was also about how these beliefs shaped the way people lived and governed their communities. Let's dive into the story of how the Reformed Church, also known as the Calvinist Church, became a powerful force in the Dutch Republic. In the early 16th century, the Netherlands was part of the Spanish Empire, and the Catholic Church held a lot of power. But as the ideas of the Reformation spread, many people began to question the authority of the Catholic Church. One of the key figures in this movement was Caspar Koolhaas, a Dutch reformer who played a significant role in the Synod of Middelburg in 1581. This synod was a meeting of Reformed leaders who wanted to establish a new church order that aligned with their beliefs. The Reformed Church in the Netherlands was different from the Catholic Church in many ways. They believed in the authority of the Bible and the importance of individual faith. They also had a different structure, with local churches led by elders and deacons. These leaders were responsible for maintaining discipline and ensuring that the congregation followed the teachings of the Bible. The Reformed Church faced many challenges, especially from the Spanish authorities, who were trying to suppress the Reformation. But the Dutch people were determined to have a church that reflected their beliefs. In 1578, the Synod of Dordrecht made important decisions about the organization of the Reformed Church, including how to handle church discipline and the role of the government in church affairs. One of the most significant changes was the relationship between the church and civil society. Unlike in other parts of Europe, where the church often had a lot of control over the government, in the Dutch Republic, the church and the state worked together in a more balanced way. This was partly because the Dutch people valued their freedom and didn't want the church to have too much power over their lives. The Reformed Church also had to deal with the issue of membership. Not everyone who attended church was a full member. Some people, called liefhebbers, were supporters, but not full members. This created some tension, especially in cities like Leiden, where the number of liefhebbers was significant. The Reformation also affected the Catholic Church in the Netherlands. Many Catholics faced persecution and had to flee to other parts of the country, or even to other countries. This led to a significant migration of people, which changed the religious landscape of the Dutch Republic. In Friesland, for example, the Reformed Church became very strong. The city of Sneek, in particular, saw a lot of growth in the number of Reformed believers. The church in Friesland had a unique structure with a strong focus on community and discipline. The Reformed Church also had to address issues like the role of the clergy. The social position of Reformed ministers was different from that of Catholic priests. Reformed ministers were often seen as teachers and leaders in the community, rather than as a separate, powerful class. The Reformation in the Dutch Republic was not just about religious beliefs. It was also about creating a new society. The Reformed Church played a crucial role in shaping the values and practices of the Dutch people. They emphasized the importance of hard work, honesty, and community service, which became hallmarks of Dutch culture. The Reformed Church also had to navigate the complex political landscape of the Dutch Republic. The government, which was made up of different provinces, had to balance the interests of various groups, including the Reformed Church, the Catholic Church, and other religious communities. This led to a system of religious tolerance, where different groups could coexist, even if they didn't always agree. In the end, the Reformation in the northern Netherlands was a complex and multifaceted process. It involved not just religious changes, but also social, political, and cultural transformations. The Reformed Church became a central institution in Dutch society, shaping the way people thought, lived, and governed their communities. The story of the English Reformation is a complex tapestry of religious, political, and social changes that reshaped the country during the 16th century. It's a period marked by intense debates, dramatic shifts in power, and the emergence of new religious ideas. Let's dive into some of the key events and figures that shaped this era. When King Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church in the 1530s, it was initially more about power and politics than deep religious conviction. Henry wanted to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon and Mary Anne Boleyn, but the Pope refused. This led Henry to declare himself the supreme head of the Church of England, effectively creating a new church. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 formalized this break, and it marked the beginning of the English Reformation. However, the Reformation didn't stop with Henry. His son, Edward VI, who became king in 1547, was a devout Protestant. Under Edward, the Church of England became more firmly Protestant. Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, played a crucial role in this process. He introduced the Book of Common Prayer in 1549 and 1552, which replaced the traditional Latin Mass with services in English. This was a significant step towards making the Church more accessible to the common people. But the Reformation faced a setback when Edward's half-sister, Mary I, came to the throne in 1553. Mary was a staunch Catholic and sought to reverse the religious changes. She restored the Catholic Mass and the authority of the Pope. Many Protestants were persecuted during her reign, earning her the nickname Bloody Mary. However, Mary's reign was short, and she died in 1558, leaving the throne to her half-sister, Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I's reign is often seen as a period of relative stability, but it was far from smooth sailing. Elizabeth sought a middle ground, or a via media, between Protestantism and Catholicism. She wanted to create a church that could unite the country and avoid the religious conflicts that had plagued her predecessors. The Act of Supremacy and the Act of Uniformity in 1559 re-established the Church of England and required all clergy to use the Book of Common Prayer. Despite Elizabeth's efforts, there were still many who felt the church wasn't Protestant enough. These people, known as Puritans, wanted to purify the church of what they saw as Catholic remnants. They pushed for more radical reforms, such as simpler church services and a more democratic church structure. This led to tension between the Puritans and the more moderate Anglicans, who supported the established church. One of the most influential Puritans was Thomas Cartwright. He argued for a Presbyterian system of church governance where power would be distributed among local churches rather than concentrated in the hands of bishops. This idea was met with resistance from the Anglican establishment, but it gained a following among some of the more radical reformers. The debates over church governance and doctrine continued throughout Elizabeth's reign. Archbishop John Whitgift, who served from 1583 to 1604, was a key figure in defending the Anglican position. He clashed with the Puritans particularly over issues like church discipline and the role of bishops. The tension between these groups would eventually spill over into the political realm, contributing to the religious and political conflicts of the 17th century. The Reformation also had a significant impact on everyday life. The shift from Latin to English in church services meant that people could understand the words being spoken and read. This increased literacy and access to religious texts. However, it also led to conflicts over how these texts should be interpreted. Some people embraced the new ideas with enthusiasm, while others clung to the old traditions. The Reformation in England was not just a religious movement. It was also a cultural and social one. It changed the way people thought about their relationship with God, the church, and the state. The debates and conflicts of this period laid the groundwork for the religious and political landscape of the 17th century, setting the stage for the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. In the midst of all this, there were also important figures like John Fox's, who wrote Acts and Monuments, a detailed account of the persecution of Protestants under Mary I. This book became a powerful tool for Protestant propaganda and helped to shape the way people understood the Reformation. The Reformation in England was a long and complex process, influenced by a wide range of factors. It involved not just kings and queens, but also bishops, priests, and ordinary people. The changes it brought about were far-reaching and had a lasting impact on the country's religious and political life. The Polish and Hungarian Reformations were unique in their own ways, shaped by the social, political, and religious contexts of these regions. In Poland, the Reformation was a complex mix of social change, religious diversity, and political maneuvering. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a vast and diverse territory, was home to a range of religious beliefs, including Catholicism, Lutheranism, Calvinism, and even anti-Trinitarianism. This diversity was both a strength and a challenge for the reformers. In the early 16th century, Poland was a republic of nobles, where the nobility, or szlachta, held significant power. This political structure meant that the Reformation was not imposed from above, but rather grew from the ground up, influenced by the nobles and the townspeople. Cities like Danzig, Elbing, and Thorn became centers of Protestant activity, where the ideas of Martin Luther and John Calvin found fertile ground. The nobles, who often had their own private chapels and schools, played a crucial role in spreading these new religious ideas. One of the key figures in the Polish Reformation was Jan Laski, also known as John A. Lasko. Laski was a nobleman and a scholar who traveled extensively, learning about the Reformation in Germany and Switzerland. When he returned to Poland, he brought with him the ideas of Calvinism and worked to establish a Reformed church. His efforts were met with resistance from the Catholic Church and some of the nobility, but he managed to gain a following among the more progressive elements of society. The Polish Reformation was also marked by a degree of religious tolerance that was rare in Europe at the time. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was home to a variety of religious groups, including Jews, Orthodox Christians, and even Muslims. This diversity led to a more tolerant attitude toward different beliefs, and the Polish Diet, the National Assembly, passed laws protecting religious freedom. This tolerance was not always perfect, but it was a significant departure from the religious wars that plagued other parts of Europe. In Hungary, the Reformation faced different challenges. Hungary was a kingdom that was divided by the Ottoman Empire's expansion. The central and southern parts of the country were under Turkish rule, while the north and west remained under Hungarian control. This political fragmentation made it difficult to implement a unified religious policy. The Reformation in Hungary was also influenced by the presence of the Ottoman Empire, which sometimes provided a buffer against Catholic counter-Reformation efforts. The Hungarian Reformation was dominated by Calvinism, which became the primary form of Protestantism in the region. Calvinist ideas were introduced by Hungarian students who had studied in Geneva and other Protestant centers. These students returned to Hungary and began to spread the new ideas, often with the support of local nobles. The Hungarian Calvinist Church established its own synods and developed a strong organizational structure. One of the most significant figures in the Hungarian Reformation was Ferenc David, a preacher and theologian who founded the Unitarian Church. David rejected the traditional doctrine of the Trinity and emphasized the importance of individual conscience and reason. His ideas were controversial and led to his imprisonment and death, but the Unitarian Church he founded continued to grow and remains an important religious community in Hungary today. The Reformation in both Poland and Hungary was not just a religious movement, but also a social and political one. It challenged the authority of the Catholic Church and the traditional social order. In Poland, the Reformation contributed to the development of a more tolerant and diverse society, while in Hungary, it helped to strengthen the national identity and resistance against foreign domination. The Reformation in these regions also had long-lasting effects on the religious landscape. In Poland, the Catholic Church eventually regained much of its influence, but the legacy of the Reformation continued to shape Polish society. In Hungary, the Calvinist Church remained a significant force, and the Unitarian Church became a unique and enduring part of Hungarian religious life. The stories of the Polish and Hungarian Reformations are complex and multifaceted, reflecting the diverse and dynamic nature of these regions. They show how the Reformation was not a single uniform movement, but a series of local and regional transformations that were shaped by the specific conditions of each place. The Reformation in Poland and Hungary was a complex and fascinating period, marked by intense religious and political changes. In Poland, the Reformation took root in the 16th century, influenced by the ideas of Martin Luther and John Calvin. However, it also developed its own unique characteristics, particularly in the form of Socinianism, a radical branch of Protestantism that rejected the Trinity and the divinity of Christ. In the early 16th century, Poland was a diverse and tolerant kingdom. The nobility, known as the Sędzlachta, played a crucial role in the spread of Protestant ideas. Many nobles were educated in Protestant universities in Germany and Switzerland, and they brought these ideas back to Poland. The city of Danzig, Gdańsk, became a center of Protestant activity, with a significant number of its population adhering to the Reformed faith. By the mid-16th century, there were numerous Protestant churches in Poland, including Lutheran, Reformed, and Socinian congregations. The Polish Reformation was not just a religious movement, it was also a social and cultural one. The nobility's support for Protestantism often reflected their desire for greater political autonomy and resistance to the Catholic Church's influence. This led to a series of religious debates and synods such as the Consensus of Sendomir in 1570, which aimed to find common ground among the various Protestant groups. Despite these efforts, tensions between Protestants and Catholics remained high, and the Catholic Counter-Reformation eventually gained momentum in the 17th century. In Hungary, the Reformation faced different challenges. The country was divided by the Ottoman Empire's occupation, which controlled much of the southern and central regions. This political fragmentation created a unique environment for the spread of Protestant ideas. The Reformation in Hungary was influenced by both Lutheranism and Calvinism, with the latter becoming particularly dominant in the 16th century. The Hungarian Reformation was also shaped by the political landscape. The Habsburg rulers, who controlled the western part of Hungary, were generally tolerant of Protestantism, at least initially. However, this tolerance was not always consistent, and there were periods of persecution. The city of Debrecen, known as the Calvinist Rome, became a center of Reformed Protestantism and a symbol of resistance against Catholic domination. The Reformation in Hungary was not just a religious movement, but also a cultural and educational one. Many Hungarian nobles and intellectuals were educated in Protestant universities, and they played a crucial role in spreading Reformed ideas. The Reformed Church in Hungary developed its own unique traditions, including a strong emphasis on education and the use of the Hungarian language in worship. Despite the initial success of the Reformation in both Poland and Hungary, the Catholic Counter-Reformation eventually gained the upper hand. In Poland, the Jesuits who were sent to the country to combat Protestantism were particularly effective. They established schools and universities, and their influence helped to reassert Catholic dominance. In Hungary, the Habsburg rulers gradually imposed Catholicism, especially in the regions they controlled. The legacy of the Reformation in Poland and Hungary is complex. While the Catholic Church ultimately regained its dominant position, the Reformation left a lasting impact on the religious and cultural landscape of both countries. The ideas of religious tolerance and the importance of education and literacy, which were central to the Reformation, continued to influence Polish and Hungarian society long after the initial wave of Protestantism had passed. In the 17th century, the Reformed churches in Poland and Hungary faced increasing pressure from the Catholic Counter-Reformation. However, they continued to play a significant role in the cultural and intellectual life of both countries. The Reformed churches in Poland and Hungary were known for their commitment to education and their support for the arts and sciences. They also played a crucial role in preserving the national identity and language of their communities, particularly in regions under foreign domination. The Reformation in Poland and Hungary was a period of great change and conflict, but it also laid the foundation for the modern religious and cultural landscape of these countries. The ideas and movements that emerged during this time continue to shape the way people think about religion, politics, and society in Poland and Hungary today. François Laplanche's work, L'écriture, le sacré, et l'histoire, érudites et politique, Protestants devant la Bible en France au XVIe siècle, is a masterpiece that delves into French Reformed theology and the history of biblical scholarship. Another significant book by Laplanche, Orthodoxie et Prédication, L'œuvre de Miraut et la querelle de la grâce universelle, is the best introduction to the important theologian Moïse Amiraut. These works explore the deep connections between theology and politics in 17th century France. The influence of Cartesianism on Reformed theology is another crucial area of study. Thomas A. McGahaken's doctoral dissertation, Cartesianism in the Netherlands, 1639 to 1676. The New Science and the Calvinist Counter-Reformation provides valuable insights into this topic. Paul Dibben's article, Skepticism, et orthodoxie réformée dans la Hollande du siècle d'or, and Michael Haid's book, Between Orthodoxy and the Enlightenment, Jean-Robert Chouet and the Introduction of Cartesian Science in the Academy of Geneva further explore the tensions and intersections between Cartesian philosophy and Reformed theology. Gisbertus Photius, a central figure in 17th century Reformed theology, is extensively covered in A. C. Duker's 4-volume work, Gisbertus Voetius. This massive study provides a comprehensive look at Voetius's life and contributions to Reformed thought. The latter part of the 17th century saw significant changes in Reformed theology. Balthasar Becker's critique of superstition, as discussed in N.V.P.C. Nuttall's Balthasar Becker, De Bestrihiger, Van Het Bigeloof, and Jean Leclerc's contributions, as explored in Annie Barnes's Jean Leclerc, 1657–1736, Et la République des Lettres, are key examples. Pierre Bayle's work, analyzed in Elizabeth Libris's 2-volume Pierre Bayle and the broader intellectual shifts of the Enlightenment, as examined in Frederick C. Beiser's The Sovereignty of Reason, highlight the evolving nature of Reformed thought. In the early 17th century, figures like Marcus Friedrich Wendelin, David Perius, and Andrew Willer played significant roles in shaping Reformed theology. Wendelin, a rector in Zerbst, wrote extensively on Christian theology, while Perius, a professor at Heidelberg, edited and popularized the works of Ursinus. Andrew Willer's Synopsis Papismi was a widely read response to Cardinal Bellarmine's disputations against the heretics. Theological debates were not limited to France and the Netherlands. In England, John Sharp, a Scottish theologian, taught in France and Scotland before publishing his Cursus Theologicus in Geneva. The debate over predestination, a central issue in Reformed theology, often caused anxiety and controversy. For example, the Arminian controversy, which began with the teachings of Jacobus Arminius, led to significant theological and political tensions in the Netherlands. Hugo Grotius, a prominent Dutch jurist and theologian, played a crucial role in these debates. His work, Ordinum Holadiae, Up Westfrisiae Pietas, defended religious tolerance and criticized the harsh treatment of remonstrants. The Synod of Dort in 1618–1619, a pivotal event in Reformed history, was convened to address these theological disputes. The Synod's canons, which affirmed Calvinist orthodoxy, had lasting implications for Reformed theology. The Remonstrant Brotherhood, formed in the wake of the Synod of Dort, continued to challenge Reformed orthodoxy. Despite facing persecution, the Remonstrants maintained their presence and influence in the Netherlands. Their history, though less studied, offers valuable insights into the dynamics of religious minorities in the 17th century. In England, the debates over predestination and church polity were closely tied to political and social changes. The works of Richard Montague and the policies of James I and Charles I reflect the complex interplay between theology and politics. Montague's A New Gag for an Old Goose and other writings stirred significant controversy and highlighted the tensions within the Church of England. In France, the works of Moïse Amiraut and the controversy over his theology of universal grace illustrate the ongoing debates within Reformed circles. Amiraut's ideas, while initially controversial, influenced later developments in Reformed thought. The role of practical theology, as emphasized by figures like Richard Greenham and William Ames, also gained prominence during this period. The 17th century was a time of significant intellectual and religious ferment. The works of these theologians and the events they shaped provide a rich tapestry of Reformed thought, reflecting the complex interplay between theology, politics, and social change. As we journey through the intricate tapestry of religious and philosophical thought in the 17th century, we see a world in flux, where old beliefs are challenged and new ideas emerge. This era, marked by the Reformation, the rise of Cartesian philosophy, and the Enlightenment, was a time of profound change and debate. In England, the Puritans, with their strict moral code and emphasis on personal piety, left a lasting impact on religious and social life. Their focus on the Sabbath and the importance of spiritual discipline shaped the way people lived and worshipped. Meanwhile, the debates over predestination and moralism highlighted the tensions within the Puritan community as different groups sought to define the path to salvation. Across the Channel, in the Netherlands, the spread of Cartesian philosophy brought new scientific and philosophical ideas that challenged traditional religious beliefs. Figures like Vossius and Caucasius were at the forefront of these debates, each offering their own interpretations of Scripture and the nature of God. The controversy over Cartesianism not only affected religious thought, but also had political implications, as it influenced the way people understood the world around them. In Switzerland, the Swiss Reformed Church grappled with its own internal struggles. The Consensus of 1675, a document that aimed to unify the Church, reflected the ongoing tension between orthodoxy and emergent enlightenment. The works of theologians like Jean-Alphonse Turrettini and Jean-Frédéric Osterwald guide the evolving nature of religious thought as they sought to reconcile faith with reason. The English Civil War and the interregnum period saw the rise of figures like Thomas Hobbes and William Chillingworth, whose ideas about politics, religion, and human nature sparked intense debate. Hobbes' materialism and Chillingworth's emphasis on reason over authority challenged the traditional religious and political order, leading to a rethinking of the role of the church and state. The Latitudinarians, a group of thinkers who advocated for a more tolerant and rational approach to religion, played a crucial role in shaping the religious landscape of Restoration England. Their ideas influenced figures like John Locke, whose works on religious tolerance and the nature of government had a lasting impact on Western thought. As we look back on this period, we see a world where old certainties were questioned and new paths were explored. The 17th century was a time of great intellectual and spiritual ferment, where the boundaries between religion, philosophy, and politics were constantly being redrawn. The debates and discussions of this era laid the groundwork for the Enlightenment and the modern world, shaping the way we think about faith, reason, and the human condition. In the end, the changing political and religious circumstances of the 17th century remind us that history is a dynamic process, driven by the ideas and actions of those who dare to challenge the status quo. As we move forward, the lessons of this era continue to resonate, reminding us of the power of ideas to transform the world.